Lila Brooks clutched the steering wheel, her dark fingers trembling as tears stung her eyes from the memories of today. She, a dark-skinned woman, had once again swallowed the humiliation at work as her ideas were stolen, and her praise given to someone else. At 7:15 p.m., after hours of fighting for her position at Horizon Media, she dreamed only of silence and a bottle of wine. At the end of the story, leave your opinion below, and don't forget to subscribe, and we'll continue. Lila Brooks gripped the steering wheel tightly, feeling the fatigue creeping into her body after a long day of work. She'd spent endless hours at her laptop at the Horizon Media Advertising Agency, rushing to meet the tight deadlines of the project. Now, at 6:45 p.m., her only dream was to buy groceries and collapse at home. Her dark curls stuck to her forehead as she exhaled, pulling into the parking lot of the Pineview store in Elton Falls. The neon sign buzzed overhead, casting a faint light on the parked cars. Lila spotted a vacant space near the entrance and steered her shabby sedan there, anticipating the end of the day. As she parked, her bumper lightly grazed the side of the silver SUV parked crookedly in the spot next to her. The quiet scraping of metal made her cringe, but she brushed it off. The scratch was barely noticeable. Just someone who'd parked ineptly. Lila turned off the engine, grabbed her bag, and got out, her sneakers tapping softly on the pavement. Her shopping list swirled in her head. Bread, eggs, maybe a discounted bottle of red wine. She didn't immediately notice the SUV's headlights on until a harsh voice broke the evening silence. "Don't you know how to drive at all?" The woman shouted, her tone oozing anger as she swung open the passenger door. Lila froze as she turned around and saw Karen Hargrove jump out of the car, her blonde bob swaying with the sudden movement. About 45 years old, in a slim blazer, Karen looked ready to cause a scandal over nothing. Before Lila could respond, the driver's door opened and Tom Hargrove stepped outside, tall and massive, his face twisted with anger. "You scratched my car and took our spot," he growled, his voice sounding menacing. Lila blinked, stunned by the sudden attack, her pulse quickening as she comprehended their accusations. "I didn't see you waiting, and the scratch is quite small," she said, trying to speak calmly despite the rising heat in her chest. She pointed to the SUV where the damage was almost imperceptible, hoping reason would win out. But Karen stepped closer, resting her hands on her hips, her eyes narrowing into slits as she grinned. "Of course you don't care. People like you always do," she blurted out, the words soaked in more than just irritation. The words hit Lila like a slap. Her stomach clenched as she caught the hidden meaning of the phrase, "people like you." She'd encountered it before, jabs at work, leering glances in stores, but here it was overt and rude. Tom stood behind his wife, crunching his knuckles, his presence adding to the threat. "You're going to pay for that scratch, one way or another," he muttered, looking at her as if she'd insulted him personally. Lila gripped her keys tighter, her instincts screaming to leave, but her legs wouldn't move. She took a deep breath, trying to speak evenly, meeting their gazes with determination. "I can rep park if it's that important, but there's no need to fight," she said, her voice firm but restrained. Karen snorted, throwing back her head as if Lila's suggestion was laughable. "Too late. You've already crossed the line," she cut off, her tone provoking a response. The tension in the air was building. The parking lot went quiet as a few shoppers slowed their steps, watching. Lila realized this wasn't about a spot or a scratch. It was something personal, and the situation promised to get worse. Lila Brooks stood in the parking lot of the Pineview store, feeling her heart beat faster at the sight of Karen and Tom Hargrove. She, a dark-skinned woman with dark curls, was used to covert jabs, but their open malice took her by surprise. Karen stepped even closer, her voice shaking with rage as she jabbed a finger in Lila's direction. "You think you can ruin other people's cars and just walk away?" she shouted, her words slicing the air like a knife. Tom, massive and menacing, nodded in support, his eyes narrowing as he scrutinized Lila. "People like you always think they're above the rules," he added, his tone drenched in contempt. Lila felt the heat rise to her cheeks, realizing that their anger went beyond the scratch on the SUV. She inhaled deeply, tried to remain calm even though her fingers were trembling around the keys. "I said I could move the car. Let's not blow this out of proportion," she replied, her voice remaining even, but protest bubbling up inside. Karen snorted, crossing her arms over her chest, her lips curved in a contemptuous grin, as if Lila was unworthy of her attention. "You're not getting off that easy. It's more than a parking lot," she threw in, her hint of racial animosity obvious. Tom stepped forward suddenly, his boots thudding loudly on the pavement, making Lila's whole body tense. He grabbed her bag hanging from her shoulder and yanked it sharply, as if he wanted to rip it out of Lila's hands. "You're going to pay for this, right here and now," he growled, his grip strong and his intentions clear. Lila yanked the bag back, her dark eyes flashing with anger as she took a step back. "Get your hands off me. I don't owe you anything," she said loudly, her voice booming across the parking lot, attracting stares. A few passers-by slowed their steps, their faces expressing curiosity, but no one intervened in the heated conflict. Lila, as a dark-skinned woman, knew this scenario. People often averted their eyes when she needed support. Karen laughed, her laughter harsh and mocking as she watched her husband wrestle with Lila. "Look, she also fights. Typical of her kind," she said, her words drenched in the venom of racism. Lila gritted her teeth. Her patience was cracking at the seams, but she refused to give them the satisfaction of her weakness. Tom moved toward her again, his fists clenched, as if he were ready to move from words to action. "You're not leaving until you admit your guilt," he growled, his voice lower and his threat more palpable. Lila backed away another step, her mind flitting between wanting to leave and needing to defend herself. She noticed several people now stopped, their gazes darting between her and the Hargroves. The tension in the parking lot was thickening. The air seemed heavy as the conflict gained momentum, promising an explosion. Lila Brooks stood in the Pineview parking lot, feeling her chest constrict with growing anger and fear of the Hargroves. She, a dark-skinned woman with a proudly raised chin, was used to slanted glances, but now it was an open assault. Tom Hargrove, clenching his fists, stepped closer, his face contorted with rage as he glared down at her. "You think you can just walk away after everything you've done?" he growled, his voice shaking with hatred directed at more than just a scratch. Karen, standing next to him, crossed her arms, her eyes glittering with malicious triumph as she added fuel to the fire. "People like her always think they can get away with anything," she added, her words drenched in racist venom. Lila felt her skin goosebumps, realizing that their anger fed not on the parking lot, but on her skin color. She straightened, her dark eyes meeting Tom's gaze, refusing to give in to their attempts to intimidate her. "I didn't do anything other than park and accidentally hit your car," she said, her voice shaking with contained rage but remaining firm. Tom snorted, his massive figure looming over her as if he wanted to crush her with his mere presence. "You lie like the rest of you and think it will work," he threw in, implying her race in every word. Karen stepped forward, her smile cold and contemptuous as she leaned closer to Lila. "We know who you are and you don't belong here," she hissed, her voice full of hatred directed at Lila as a dark-skinned woman. Lila clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms as she fought the urge to scream back at their insults. She knew this type of person, those who disguise racism as a domestic grievance, but now the masks came off. "You have no right to tell me where I belong," she replied, her words coming out sharply, echoing across the parking lot. Tom suddenly shoved her in the shoulder, his hand striking with force, causing Lila to stagger back to her car. "You'll do what we say or you'll be sorry," he growled, his threat clear and his actions a physical manifestation of their prejudice. Lila regained her balance, her heart pounding as she glared at him defiantly, refusing to break. Karen laughed, her laughter cutting her ears as she savored the humiliation of Lila, the dark-skinned woman who dared to resist. "Look at her, still pretending to be innocent," she said, her tone full of sarcasm and racist superiority. The passers-by had gathered into a small crowd now, their whispers reaching Lila, but no one interfered with what was happening. She could feel their stares, feel her skin becoming a target for their curiosity, but not their support. Tom raised his hand again, ready to strike again, his anger fueled by her resilience and her skin color. Lila retreated back to the car, her mind frantically searching for a way out as the situation teetered on the brink of explosion. Lila Brooks leaned against her car in the Pineview parking lot, her breathing quickening as Tom Hargrove loomed over her with a menacing look. She, a dark-skinned woman with burning eyes, could feel their racism turning a petty argument into a furious clash. Tom raised his hand, ready to strike again, his face contorted with anger fueled by her refusal to comply. "You're not leaving until you apologize for your insolence," he growled, his words drenched in hatred for her skin color. Karen stood beside him, her lips stretched in an evil grin as she encouraged her husband to continue. "People like her never know their place," she threw in, her voice oozing contempt for Lila. Suddenly, a harsh voice cut through the tense air, causing Tom to freeze with his hand raised. "Get away from her right now, or you'll regret it," shouted a young guy, stepping from the shadows of the store. It was Diego, a Pineview employee, his dark hair sticking out from under his cap and his hands clenched into fists. Lila caught a glimpse of his uniform jacket, her heart twitching at the unexpected support in this fight. Diego, himself Hispanic, looked at Tom with defiance, his presence breaking their confidence. "I saw the whole thing, and the cameras recorded your actions too," he added, pointing to a pole with a security camera. Karen rolled her eyes, her annoyance replaced by mockery as she turned to Diego with disdain. "Oh, another minority hero, come to save your girlfriend?" she blurted out. Her racism now extended to him as well. Lila gritted her teeth, her anger flaring up more, seeing their hatred embracing anyone who didn't look like them. Tom lowered his hand, but his gaze remained angry as he shifted it from Lila to Diego. "It's none of your business, kid. Get out of here before I make you," he growled, his threat aimed at both of them. Diego stepped closer, his voice louder, spreading across the parking lot, drawing more attention. "You touched her, and I'll call the police if you don't back off," he said, his determination punching a hole in their arrogance. Lila straightened, her dark skin glistening under the light of the street lamps as she sensed a shift in the dynamics of the conflict. A few gawkers now held up their phones, filming what was happening, their silence replaced by whispers and notes. Karen noticed this. Her face paled, but she tried to maintain a facade of contempt. "You're all the same. You like to make drama out of nothing," she threw, her racist tone becoming desperate. Tom clenched his fists, his anger fighting uncertainty as he looked back at the growing crowd. Lila felt her fear receding, replaced by a spark of hope thanks to Diego's intervention. She looked up at him, her voice growing firmer as she addressed the Hargroves with defiance. "You will not make me feel less because of who I am," she said, her words a weapon against their prejudice. The situation changed. The air shook with foreboding as the Hargroves' racism began to turn against themselves. Lila Brooks stood next to Diego in the Pineview parking lot, her dark eyes burning with determination despite the recent threat. She, a dark-skinned woman accustomed to covert outbursts, now faced the open racism of Tom and Karen Hargrove, but the situation was changing. Tom, still clenching his fists, turned to Diego, his face flushed with anger as he tried to regain control of the stage. "You think you can tell me what to do, puppy?" he growled, his words drenched in contempt for the young Latino. Karen, standing behind him, added her venom, her voice shaking with anger directed at them both. "These minorities always stick together to ruin our lives," she blurted out, her racism spewing out without any shame. Diego didn't flinch, his dark eyes meeting Tom's gaze as he pulled his phone from his jacket pocket. "I recorded everything you did, and it's not just the cameras anymore," he said as he lifted the device, revealing the video of their aggression. Lila felt her heart jump, realizing that the evidence now lay in the hands of this unexpected ally. The crowd around them grew, people whispering, some taking their own videos, capturing the Hargroves' racist behavior. Karen noticed this, her confidence shaken as she tried to shout over the growing rumble of the crowd. "You're all exaggerating. It's just an argument over parking," she shouted, but her voice sounded fake and desperate. At that moment, there was a sound of footsteps, and a tall man in a leather jacket approached the group. He pulled out his badge, his voice calm but firm as he assessed the situation in front of him. "I'm an off-duty officer, and I need to know what's going on here," he said, his gaze stopping on Tom, still blazing with anger. Lila took a deep breath, her dark skin glistening under the light of the street lamps as she explained what had happened. They attacked me over a scratch on my car and told me I didn't belong here, she said, her words clear despite the tremor in her voice. Diego nodded, showing the officer footage of Tom shoving Lila and Karen spewing racist slurs. Tom took a step back, his face pale as he tried to justify himself to the new authority. It's a misunderstanding. I didn't mean anything by it. Just protecting my car, he mumbled, but his lies sounded weak against evidence. Karen grabbed his arm, her eyes darting from the officer to the crowd, her arrogance evaporating. We're not some criminals. She provoked us with her insolence, she blurted out, still clinging to the racist justification for their actions. The officer raised an eyebrow, his voice growing colder as he addressed him with obvious disbelief. Pushing a man and insulting him because of the color of his skin is not a defense, he said, eliciting an approving whisper from the crowd. Sirens wailed in the distance, the approaching sound adding to the tension as everyone waited for the denouement. Lila looked at Diego, her gratitude reflected in the warm gaze as she felt supported. A police car pulled into the parking lot, and 2 officers got out, their uniforms suggesting order in the chaos. The female officer approached Lila, her tone businesslike, but soft as she asked the key question. Do you wish to press charges against them for assault and threats? She asked, her gaze lingering on Lila, waiting for an answer. Lila straightened, her dark curls swaying as she made a decision born of years of dealing with something like this. Yes, I want them to answer for their racism and aggression, she said, her voice as firm as ever. Tom froze, his fists unclenched as a uniformed officer told him to turn around for the handcuffs. Karen cried out, her face contorted with horror as she clung to one last attempt at justification. You can't arrest us. We haven't done anything wrong, she shouted, but her words were drowned in the noise of the crowd. Lila stood motionless, her chest heaving with deep breaths as justice finally caught up with those who saw in her only the color of her skin. Lila Brooks watched as the police officers led Tom Hargrove away to his car, her dark eyes following his every move. She, a dark-skinned woman whose skin glistened under the light of the street lamps, felt the tension in her chest slowly release. Tom sat handcuffed, his face a mixture of anger and humiliation as he avoided her gaze. Karen stood beside him, her hands shaking as she yelled at the officers, trying to maintain the remnants of her dignity. You don't understand. We're not criminals. This is all her fault, she yelled, her racist lies sounding increasingly desperate and ridiculous. Lila shook her head, her lips pressed together as she held back the urge to respond to their latest outbursts. The female officer approached Layla, her notebook open as she recorded the testimony with professional precision. We recorded everything, including the tape and evidence. The case looks unequivocal, she said, her voice calm but firm, promising justice. Lila nodded, her dark curls swaying as she reaffirmed her decision to press charges against them. I'm tired of being silent when people like them attack because of my race, she uttered, her words reflecting years of dealing with such hatred. The officer looked at her with understanding. Her pen froze for a moment before continuing her notes. Diego stepped closer, his phone still in his hand as he watched the departing police car. They thought they could humiliate you and get away without consequences, he said, his voice full of satisfaction at their failure. Lila turned to him, her face softening as she thanked him for daring to change the course of events. You didn't have to get involved, but I'm glad you did, she replied. Her gratitude was genuine, binding them together through their shared struggle. Diego shrugged, his smile was slight but proud as he tucked his phone away in his pocket. Karen was still muttering something inaudible, her voice growing quieter as the police took Tom away finally. We're good people. She's the one who provoked us with her looks, she muttered, her racism coming out even in the moment of defeat. Lila heard this, her eyebrows rose, but she decided not to waste any more of her energy on them. She knew the truth. Good people don't attack others because of skin color or a minor scratch. The crowd began to disperse, some throwing looks of sympathy at her, others of curiosity, but Lila stood straight. She turned toward the entrance of Pine Views, her steps sure as she headed for the wine she craved. Diego walked beside her, his presence a silent support as they left the chaos of the parking lot behind. Lila breathed in the cool air, her mind clearing as she reflected on what she had just experienced. This evening had reminded her that racism could erupt at any moment, but it wasn't invincible. She had defeated not only the Hargroves, but the fear they had tried to instill in her. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. If you liked the story, please give this video a thumbs up.